My assignment today is to address the problem of the unresolved Karabakh conflict in the context of the US-Azerbaijan strategic partnership. We speak about a US-Azerbaijan strategic partnership at the initiative of the late President Haidar Aliyev, who, following his first visit to the United States, returning to Baku, issued a decree about instituting a strategic partnership between Azerbaijan and the United States. This is a legacy of the late President Haidar Aliyev. This partnership operates in practice rather one-sidedly. Azerbaijan, a small country, delivers more to the United States than the superpower delivers to Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan has chosen a Western orientation for its energy exports, supplying America's allies in Europe and Israel, and taking some risks vis-à-vis Russia and Iran in order to do that. Azerbaijan has opted for a Western secular orientation in its national policy. It has, since 2011, provided unlimited overland and air passage rights for American and NATO forces operating in Afghanistan and Central Asia. Azerbaijani troops have served together with American troops in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Kosovo. Azerbaijan provides, in front of the world and beneficial to the United States, an example of a secular Muslim country successfully modernizing. Azerbaijan is buying large amounts of US government bonds. It has acquired Boeing aircraft, providing for thousands of jobs in the United States. It has chosen to acquire a satellite system from a Virginia-based company. All this creates income, value, and jobs in the United States. These could be described as Azerbaijan's deliverables to America. What has the United States, on its part, delivered to Azerbaijan? The heyday of this strategic partnership occurred in the late 1990s during the second term of the Clinton administration. At that time, the United States, in its policy, closely connected Azerbaijan and Europe. American energy policy regarded Europe and the Black Sea, Caspian Sea region, with Azerbaijan at its heart, as one single territory from the point of view of energy security. American policy and the strategic partnership operated at its best, at its most effective, when Azerbaijan was regarded as a part of Europe's energy security. This focus has diluted after 2001, when the United States focused on relatively short-term priorities: operations in Afghanistan, operations in Iraq, containing the nuclear program of Iran. These are relatively short-term goals. As a result, the strategic partnership lost its initial impetus on the side of the United States. The issue of the Karabakh conflict was never included by the United States in its strategic partnership with Azerbaijan. Instead of supporting its strategic partner on this issue, the United States has taken an even-handed attitude between Azerbaijan and Armenia. The official line of the United States on the Karabakh conflict is the solution must be peaceful and mutually agreed between the parties. Such a position does not represent a policy. It represents rather avoiding a clear-cut policy. And this is what we must change with joint efforts. Since the collapse of the Soviet Union, international law has largely become inapplicable in the South Caucasus. Borders have been changed de facto by force, populations have been ethnically cleansed, troops have been stationed in foreign territories without the agreement of host countries, outside the framework of international law. The United States and the West have made very little effort to restore the operation of international law in the South Caucasus. And this is very evident with regard to the Karabakh conflict, or rather the Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict. Almost 1 million Azeris have been ethnically cleansed from their homes. Ethnic cleansing is something completely unacceptable in the West. Many Western governments, political leaders, mass media, opinion leaders are advocating humanitarian intervention and other measures to address the problem of ethnic cleansing. This has not been done in the South Caucasus. Many in America are prepared to intervene in distant continents, in Africa, Asia, other places, to address the problem of ethnic cleansing. This problem is not being recognized in the South Caucasus, and most prominently in Karabakh. The United States, NATO, the European Union intervened in Bosnia and in Kosovo to reverse the ethnic cleansing. This has been done successfully. We have seen political settlements, the reversal of ethnic cleansing, and the prosecution of those responsible for war crimes committed against civilians. It has been done in the former Yugoslavia, as I mentioned, Bosnia, Kosovo, even in Croatia. It has been done elsewhere in the world. It has not been done in the South Caucasus. The reasons are obvious. The United States and others did not want to anger Russia. That is one reason. The other reason is the power of Armenian lobbies in the West, especially in the United States. Peacekeeping has been internationalized in the Balkans, but remains uninternationalized, one-sided in the South Caucasus. Accepting unilateral peacekeeping is one part of acknowledging a sphere of influence. We have seen that in Georgia, where Russia holds a monopoly on so-called peacekeeping. Azerbaijan is in a better position compared to Georgia. There are no Russian so-called peacekeeping troops on the territory of Azerbaijan. Moreover, there are international agreements within the OSCE that peacekeeping troops on the territory of Azerbaijan, if and when deployed, may not come from Minsk Group co-chairman countries and may not come from neighboring countries. Both of these provisions exclude Russia. In the current negotiations, Russia is attempting to circumvent these restrictions. Russia is proposing to deploy not just peacekeeping, but peace enforcement troops, which is a higher level of peacekeeping with more heavy armaments. So Russia wants to change the peacekeeping formula into peace enforcement formula in order to gain a right to introduce heavy weaponry, and moreover wants to circumvent the restriction against neighboring countries and against Minsk co-chairing countries providing peacekeeping troops. But, as I mentioned, Azerbaijan is in a better situation than Georgia because there are no Russian troops and there are explicit prohibitions against deployment of Russian troops as peacekeepers. The Minsk group has proven to be completely useless. It is discredited. Nevertheless, we cannot afford calling for its dissolution. It is a necessary difficulty that we must cope with. Calling for the dissolution of the Minsk group, although it would be justified both morally and politically, would give the impression that we are not interested in a peaceful solution. We have to live with the Minsk group as dysfunctional as it is, but we have to find a way of somehow circumventing the Minsk group by creating a more effective mechanism without eliminating the Minsk group. One example of this can be learned from Germany, which has started a bilateral channel of negotiations with Russia regarding the Transnistria conflict. There is an international mechanism of the Transnistria conflict. It's called the 5+2 mechanism, which is as dysfunctional as the Minsk group. Germany is not a member of it. But Germany would like to circumvent the 5+2, start a bilateral negotiation process with Russia, and then submit the result of this process for ratification by the international 5+2 agreement. I suggest that the United States could do something similar in the case of the Karabakh conflict. The United States can appoint a high-level presidential envoy of the United States president in charge of the Karabakh conflict. And while continuing American participation at a lower level in the Minsk group, it could pursue the higher-level channel bilaterally with Russia. This would have the merit, first, of correcting the imbalance in the Minsk group, where Russia clearly holds center stage, clearly dominates the proceedings at the presidential level, whereas the United States and France are represented by medium-level diplomats who are not decision makers. So the appointment of a presidential high-level US envoy would rectify the imbalance of the Minsk group, and I think this is something that Azerbaijan could insist on after the American presidential election. So as soon as we know who will be the new occupant of the White House after January, it's time to air this proposal. Now, Russia in the Minsk group does not play an even-handed role. The United States does. Russia does not. Russia is, in fact, the guarantor of Armenia's territorial gains at the expense of Azerbaijan. And in return for this, Russia receives clear strategic benefits. It has its famous proverbial outpost, military outpost in Armenia. It has been able to deploy S-300 anti-air missiles in Armenia. And what is the role of these missiles? The same as the S-300s deployed in Abkhazia. Those in Armenia force the United States to negotiate air passage with the Russians. As long as those S-300s are deployed in Armenia and in Abkhazia and in Armenia, the air corridor that Azerbaijan provides to the United States becomes negotiable with Russia. Great benefit to the Russians. The Armenian side is taking advantage of this situation in order to threaten the opening of an international airport in Karabakh, which would be a provocation against Azerbaijan, would force Azerbaijan to respond somehow. Russian troops are deployed on some of Armenia's borders, including those with Turkey and with Iran. So these are tangible benefits that Russia can gain by guaranteeing the territorial gains of Armenia at the expense of Azerbaijan. The United States has not yet developed an effective response to this situation. The US position that the solution to the conflict can only be peaceful and only by agreement between the two parties is a formula that disguises the absence of a clear-cut policy. There are symbolic issues as well, like the infamous Section 907, enacted by the US Congress, waived by the US administration since 2001, but still on the books. The United States, or rather the State Department, I should say, in the White House, have dealt a setback to the negotiating process by introducing the Zurich Protocols in 2009. The origin of the Zurich Protocols lies in the American internal political system. It is not a foreign policy-driven decision. It is a domestically driven decision. The goal of the US administration with the Zurich Protocols was to remove the issue of the Armenian genocide from the American domestic political arena. The appearance of that issue every single year in April in the American domestic political arena threatened the US relations with Turkey, a key strategic partner of the United States. The United States needs Turkey, perhaps more than Turkey needs the United States at this stage. So to escape from that dilemma, the US administration offered to the local Armenian community and to Yerevan a bargain. Give up the genocide issue, take it out of the American political system, and downgrade it to a subcommission of historians, a joint subcommission of historians, which would have to study whether or not there was an Armenian genocide. And in return for this, Yerevan would receive a huge bonus of having the Armenia-Turkey border opened. This suited the purposes of the administration regarding the domestic Armenian vote and regarding relations with Turkey. But the third party was to pay the costs, and that third party was to be Azerbaijan. By opening the Armenia-Turkish border without linkage to Karabakh settlement, Azerbaijan was going to lose its most effective negotiating leverage. Azerbaijan and Turkey are not against opening the borders. They are for a conditional opening of the borders. First of all, it has to be done jointly by Azerbaijan and Turkey, not by Turkey alone, and not by Azerbaijan alone, but jointly by Turkey and Azerbaijan. And secondly, and most importantly, it has to be done in return for Armenia evacuating its troops from occupied territories. By opening the Armenia-Turkey border without these conditions, Azerbaijan loses its most significant negotiating leverage, while Armenia loses the motivation to withdraw the troops. This was a terrific setback to the negotiating process. I know how the Zurich Protocol idea originated. It originated from the Brookings Institution, and it was sold, so to speak, by the Assistant Secretary of State to Secretary Clinton. I wrote many times that the United States and Secretary Clinton personally need a graceful exit from the Zurich Protocols, a graceful exit, not to abolish them, not to withdraw them, but simply to quietly drop them. It has not yet been done. The United States Embassy in Yerevan continues advocating the signing and ratification of the protocols. The US ambassador in Yerevan keeps saying that the ball is in Turkey's court, which is a completely wrong approach, and it encourages Armenian intransigence. So we must never hear about Zurich Protocols after the January elections. Whoever is in the White House after January, let us never hear again about the Zurich Protocols. They failed anyway, and they failed because Ankara woke up. After a period of uncertainty, Ankara woke up to what was happening. And in this clarifying of minds in Ankara, Azerbaijan played a key role. Azerbaijan used soft power in Turkey through non-governmental organizations and through interparliamentary ties. It was a good example of Azerbaijan effectively using soft power. So forget about the Zurich protocols. What can we recommend to the United States after abandoning the Zurich protocols? What can we recommend to the United States? First, to stop advocating in Azerbaijan for strategic patience. Strategic patience is a cover for waiting forever and doing nothing. Strategic patience can be understood in two ways. Either working in practice along a clear plan, patiently over the long term, to resolve the problem. That's one way of understanding strategic patience. The other way of understanding strategic patience is doing nothing. So we must switch from one understanding to the other understanding of strategic patience after January. Secondly, the phrase, the solution can only be a peaceful solution mutually agreed upon. This is a legitimate recommendation as long as the present situation would not have been achieved by military force. But the present situation has been achieved by military force by the Armenian side with Russian support. So advocating for exclusively peaceful means ignores the fact that the current situation is the result of massive force, and not only military force, but force against civilians through mass ethnic cleansing. Since American society is so sensitive to ethnic cleansing around the world, we have to bring the same level of understanding in the United States about what happened in Karabakh in order for the United States to draw the policy consequences from it. As a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, the United States could invoke the resolutions, the unimplemented resolutions of the General Assembly, and call for their implementation. It is time to advocate in the United States for using the term occupation and ethnic cleansing with regard to Karabakh. These terms, the term occupation, is officially being used by the United States with regard to Abkhazia and South Ossetia. Karabakh is a similar case. We can quote the example of Abkhazia and South Ossetia in order to obtain a similar usage of the word occupation regarding Karabakh and an acknowledgement of the ethnic cleansing that did occur. Airing these issues in international organizations can perhaps result in paper documents that may have little impact on the ground. However, in a cumulative process, all these documents can create a certain atmosphere. An atmosphere in which it becomes clear to international public opinion and international organizations that this is a massive ethnic cleansing, a massive occupation that has been unaddressed and needs to be addressed. So creating this kind of atmosphere is important, even if it does not soon result in clear consequences on the ground. On a broader level, other countries that are looking at this situation may well conclude that the United States does not really reward its allies. Azerbaijan has delivered a lot outside the framework of the Karabakh conflict resolution process. Azerbaijan has delivered a lot to the United States. Azerbaijan has delivered far less. The United States has delivered far less and has no clear policy on the issue that is most sensitive to Azerbaijan, the strategic partner, which is Karabakh. So other countries may conclude that US strategic partnerships work in a one-sided way. It is important in the own interest of the United States to correct and clarify this perception. The United States needs to be seen as rewarding allies, not just using them. we need to develop a more clear and more long-term rationale for this strategic partnership. Azerbaijan cannot be seen only as a stopover on the way from America to Afghanistan. It is more than a station along this way. Azerbaijan cannot be seen only as a listening post vis-à-vis Iran. Azerbaijan is far more than that. Azerbaijan is a part of the overall transatlantic American-European solution to energy security. The United States, as I mentioned at the beginning, used to regard Azerbaijan as part of a Euro-Atlantic policy of energy security. This focus existed before 2001. It needs to be restored. Ambassador Morningstar, by the way, is a living testimony to this link. He used to be part of that US policy in its best days in the late 1990s. So he has the institutional memory of that policy. And his appointment to Baku is a very positive omen. So after January, let us, with common efforts, advocate for the appointment of a US special representative, of the US president for the Karabakh conflict, and advocate for a restoration of the US focus on transatlantic energy security, viewed as a common concern of the United States and of its European allies, and to which Azerbaijan is a critical partner. And if we manage to locate Azerbaijan into that broader context, this would underscore the importance of Azerbaijan to the United States, national interests, and to incentivize the United States to take a more fair position on the and more proactive position on the Karabakh conflict. Thank you.